We're going to talk to someone today who I greatly admire. He's a very courageous figure, award-winning filmmaker, writer, and investigative journalist Bart Sibrel. You probably know him from his videos online that were very popular. Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, and The Astronauts Gone Wild, which is just, you can watch that. That's the one where Buzz Aldrin punched him, so you probably know him for that. But he has a background in the media. He worked for all the television networks, ABC, NBC, CBS. Just a real journalist. There aren't too many of them around that. And he's going to talk about his new book, Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list. Bart Sibrel, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Don.
Well, I'm glad to talk to you, and I'm glad to make your acquaintance. And I want to thank our mutual friend, Bob Wilson, for bringing us together. He has an eclectic list of acquaintances, including you. So I'm very glad he hooked this up because I admired your work for a long time. I said I watched Astronauts Gone Wild many times. The Funny Thing Happened on the Moon as well too. But your new book is fascinating, Moon Man. So we're going to get in, talk about that a lot. But how did you start, investigating the Apollo program? What caused you to start doubting it?
Well, I was only 4 when they allegedly walked on the moon, and my dad was in the United States Air Force, and I got like a packet of publicity of great 9x12 color prints, and I thought it was the greatest thing. I was a big fan, had those pictures up there for 10 years, age 4 to 14. I guess that's watching them about 3,650 times, seeing those same pictures over and over again. And then when I was 14, I saw Bill Casing on a television program saying he worked for NASA during the Apollo program 6 years and never happened. I'm thinking, oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. So I go back to the pictures on the wall, and sure enough, hidden in plain sight, eyes wide shut. Back then, the original pictures, the sand was brown, and the background sand was bluish gray. That was a major problem because the early prints that I have, you could tell the line between the real moon and the fake background pretty easily. And so that kind of planted a seed in my mind. So fast forward another 10 years, I'm 24, I'm a filmmaker, and I am editing for the man who produced that program 10 years earlier with Bill Casing on it. So he put us in touch with one another. Bill suggested I do a documentary about it, and I originally turned it down because I figured there was a decent 1 out of 4 chance they faked it, which is pretty strong. I like puzzles. I'm relentless. If I start looking into this, it could be hazardous to my health, so I turned it down. Another 5 years go by. I started reading the Bible, got a 1-year Bible, read it 5 times in a row. And I thought, well, there is a God, there is a right and wrong, and there is a judgment to come. If they didn't go to the moon, that would be more profound than if they'd actually gone. More profound historically to have faked it than have actually gone. And if that's true, I said, this is important. It's worth dying for. I'm going to die anyway. Might as well die for a noble cause. So I called Bill back, said I changed my mind. And my prime investor for this $1 million project is an anonymous millionaire who is a board member of an aerospace company building rockets for NASA, who knows from an engineering point of view we didn't go to the moon, and he felt it was his patriotic duty to, support these films. And then so funny thing is the first film took me 7 years. Halfway into that, I find this footage that proves they never left Earth orbit. They're faking a shot right in front of your eyes with the CIA on a private channel audio telling them how to do it.
Oh, Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
The thing says don't show to the public in the first frame, and I'm like, oh, this should be good. And it's the only unedited reel, and they're doing outtakes of a special effects shot. And so we have them photographically faking a scene of the moon landing right in front of your eyes. The CIA telling them how to fake it is on the audio. We have CIA threats recorded on audio by an astronaut in the sun talking about calling the CIA to have me assassinated, which wouldn't be necessary if they really went to the moon.
You want to call the CIA? Have them whacked?
Right.
And lo and behold, the book releases for the first time the actual code name of the real Apollo program, the military base, the name of it, where it was filmed here in the United States, the dates it was filmed, 15 eyewitnesses, the names of 15 people who were there personally eyewitnessing it, including President Johnson himself. And this information came by way of the deathbed confession of the chief of security, MP military police at this particular base at that time.
Wow, that's before we get to your story, I want to just a few tidbits from Bill Kaysing, who wrote the book "We Never Went to the Moon," and that's the first time I heard about it. And I, as I said, I think I was one of the first ones to order it. I was already on every list there was, his subversive list back then, even as a very young guy. But what I found really interesting, I'd heard a little bit about it, but you go into the book before we get to you. That Kaysing had contacted astronaut James Irwin, who was one of the astronauts to walk on the moon, supposedly. And he was apparently the only one that was a bit recalcitrant about it. And he was, to tell the story, that he was scheduled to meet with Kaysing and then he dies. I mean, typical conspiratorial stuff.
Well, basically, you can imagine my surprise if I say, oh, excuse me, let me take this call. In fact, I forgot to turn my ringer off. There we go. But imagine it's Buzz Aldrin calling me, right?
Yeah.
Rather than me tracking them down. Imagine if I got a call, one of the lead investigators into the fraud from one of the, faking astronauts. Well,
Right.
Imagine my shock if they called me. So that happened to Bill Kaysing. He was on Oprah. He was publishing books about the moon landings being fake from firsthand experience. And James Irwin calls him up and says, we need to have a serious talk about your book. And he explained the reason why he contacted him was because he had just become a born-again Christian. And he said, I'm concerned for my safety. Call me at this number 3 days from now. Coincidentally, on that third day, the astronaut had a fatal heart attack. So that, going into it, then the Apollo 1 fire, that whole thing I talked
Absolutely.
about, unfortunately, and I'm not saying it. The dead man's family is saying it. They're saying, they say without a doubt, 100% certain, the fire that killed what would have been the crew to walk on the moon first, the fire was set intentionally, the CIA is involved.
Yeah.
The dead man himself told his wife the day before, something strange is going on. The CIA is all over the launch pad. The CIA is all over the launch pad for the first time, and the very next day, 3 people die.
I first learned about that on that uncharacteristically good Fox News special back probably early 2000s. Did we go to the moon or something? And they interviewed Grissom's wife, who was still alive at the time, and I think one of his sons. But I thought, how is this not, again, I don't know why I'm so naive, but I mean, this shows what kind of media we have. That's not a news story for the New York Times and 60 Minutes to tackle that. The guy who was scheduled to be the first man to walk on the moon, not Neil Armstrong, Gus Grissom, he was died, and his family is alleging he was murdered by NASA. I mean, that's a huge story.
Well, it's actually huger, if you can imagine such a thing, which is because I talk about this in the second to the last chapter of the book. The number one reason why the government is so adamant about defending the moon landing, the faking thereof. They'll go to enormous lengths. They have PR campaigns. They can't ever give it up, because if the truth comes out that the moon landings were fake, the very next question people are going to ask is, okay, Bart has over here evidence that the moon landings are fake, and the Grissom family has evidence that the CIA set the fire at NASA that killed their husband and father. Do you think the two events are related? Of course they're related. So let's just say they faked the moon landing, not a single person was killed. Maybe the truth would have come out, who knows, but it wouldn't matter, not nearly as much, if it is also proven that they deliberately murdered their own hero astronauts for criticizing the program and refusing to participate in the fraud. I talked to Betty Grissom for hours, talked to her son for hours. They know for a fact it was set deliberately by the CIA, and I know for a fact the moon landings were faked. Do you think the two events are related? Of course they're related. So that's the biggest thing. If the public knew it was fake, it killed nobody. Oh, terrible thing. But if they knew it was fake and they murdered the men that would have been the first men on the moon to keep it a secret, they killed their own employees when the first document of our country says the right to life. And the government took the life away. Like I think the British killed 5 people, maybe, before we rebelled. Maybe it was 3.
Yeah.
And now the government has gotten to such a point where they're murdering their own employees to keep their crimes a secret. We need a completely new government from scratch. We can't.
Well, and this would
You know what I mean?
be, yeah, certainly. I believe that, but certainly this would be one of the biggest eye openers. Some things I didn't really realize. I didn't realize, for instance, that Neil Armstrong. I always found his behavior odd. Obviously, the way he didn't seem to want to talk about this great accomplishment. But there are no pictures of him on the moon. All the pictures that were taken, or he taking of it of Buzz Aldrin. But as you point out, there was no room for error. Apparently, wouldn't they have had a backup camera or something in case maybe something went wrong with that? You don't want to miss out on this opportunity. But people think there are photographs of him, but none of those photos are of him.
Well, let me tell you, I personally went to the archives, the NASA archives. Personally went there, and it's like there's about 3 people handling the archives there at the time. And I said I would like a still picture. And they're supposed to have every picture from Apollo 11 there. I'd like a still picture, please, of Neil Armstrong's, the first man on the moon. Sure, you've heard of him, standing on the moon. Just one picture. They couldn't find a single one. They come back scratching their heads. They go in, they look again, come back scratching their head, shaking their head. They go in again, come back out. They can't understand why there's not a picture of Neil Armstrong on the moon. First man on the moon. There's not a single still picture. Now, there's a TV image, which I think was not actually him. Black and white, face is not shown. There's an automatic motion picture camera on the side of the lunar module. Then that's it. They've mislabeled some. Occasionally they'll say, oh, here's one of Neil Armstrong, but it's a physical impossibility because of the camera locked to his vest. Now, you never been to the moon before, microradiation, gamma rays, hot, 500 degrees, minus 500 degrees the other way. And greatest event in human history, he drops the thing. Boy, that'd be terrible. Maybe we should give a camera, I don't know, $200 billion. We'll need another 20. Sure, if we can afford that. But of course, but the guy didn't want any, I don't think it was legal, although it's relevant now. I think it was moral. He didn't want any moral responsibility. I suspect they threatened the life of his family, because I don't think he would have cooperated. I think at that time he had a good character, and I think he would have said, I'll pass. But he couldn't resign in front of the world. So
Right, exactly.
they probably turned up the heat, threatened his family or something.
And then, as you point out, and others have pointed out as well, that people need to just consider the science. Just try to consider how they dealt with those kind of temperatures on the surface of the moon, which would give hundreds of degrees above zero, and then if you go in the shade, it's 100 degrees below zero. What kind of magical heating, cooling system did they have? As you point out, what kind of batteries could they possibly have had that ran? They would have had to have nonstop air conditioning and that heat for 3 days or whatever. I mean, how can people not question that?
Well, one of the reasons why they can't question that is they destroyed all the blueprints and electronic schematics and the hardware and the original videotapes and the original rocket telemetry of the locations. They got rid of all that stuff. Now imagine Bill Gates. He spends $200 billion to make the first supercomputer. It works great, fantastic. Good job. Now let's throw it all in a furnace along with these schematics and blueprints. Would anyone do that? The only technology they should have gotten rid of was the atomic bomb, and they didn't even do that. And 10 years later, it's 1,000 times more powerful. So if they could go to the moon with 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone in all of NASA, on the first attempt with 1960s technology, people would have been on Mars 10 years later. We'd be in another solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon. Here's their claim. Today, they can only travel with people 1,000th the distance to the moon. So how could they go 1,000 times farther with 5 decades older equipment that had never been used before in the first attempt? Yeah. The South Pole and the North Pole took a dozen tries before people did it, and that's here on Earth. Exactly. It took Elon Musk 5 or 6 tries to land a rocket vertically with the fastest multiple synchronized computers trying to help him do so.
And how about that phone call from Nixon? How about that live phone call from the White House? Exactly what kind of technology could possibly have existed? I mean, that's a hell of a landline. That's quite a distance there. I mean, did anybody question that?
Well, actually, it was 6G. We'll get in about 5 more years. Yeah.
I mean, but they actually did that, and people bought it. I mean, I did it at the time as a little kid, but of course I was a little kid. But I can't believe any adult didn't say, "Wait a minute."
Yeah, I mean, it's like saying, Don, 50 years ago, Toyota made a car that could travel 50,000 miles on 1 gallon of gasoline. But darn, today, with 5 decades of better computer fuel technology, they can only travel 1,000th the distance on a gallon of gas. Would you believe the original claim? Of course not.
No,
But that's
absolutely.
what they're saying. They're saying
And,
they went 1,000 times farther than NASA can send people today with 5 decades older
right.
technology on
And
the
and 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 it got actually more ridiculous as the flights went on. I guess was it 16 and 17, the last two, or maybe just the last one, that had the dune buggy, and people, immediately said, "Wait a minute, how did that fit in that little craft? How did you
Yeah,
get around?"
that's why Apollo 18 was canceled. They wanted to brag. They played golf to show us,
Yes.
they could drive cars. Apollo 18 was going to have a basketball team. And so, they figured we better not push our luck,
Well, I
on
mean,
that
but
one.
you've heard their explanation that the reason they could fit that dune buggy in there is because it folded up like the Jetsons car. And my question has been, so you had that technology to fold up a vehicle like that in 1971 or two or whatever it was, and what happened to it? I mean, I haven't seen any folding cars on Earth here. They don't. I mean, this is amazing to think that they have. I mean, they must have just watched the Jetsons or something, but that's the excuses they give, and you're supposed to believe that kind of science. It's completely illogical.
Yeah, and then you have NASA occasionally making accidentally truthful statements. A couple of space astronauts in Earth orbit, said eventually we hope to go to the moon.
Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Then you have Kelly Smith of the Orion project that was supposed to have an unmanned vehicle orbiting the Earth in 2018. That never happened either. And then he's talking about the radiation. Good for him. And a lot of people don't know it. There's a huge radiation field above the Earth. Every
Yes.
space mission, including today, the space station, it's well
Van
below
Allen
that.
belts, yeah.
Except you'd have to go through it to the moon and back, which would be very dangerous. And so the guy even says the technology to travel through that region of space has yet to be invented.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Well, I'm thinking, well, then how did the Apollo astronauts do it? Which is interesting. The part of the mission that they're faking that we have unedited footage of is them faking being halfway to the moon, which means they can't go halfway. They can't leave Earth orbit then, and they can't leave Earth orbit now. So the guy admits it's too radioactive to go through. And then I'm thinking, oops. And then how did they go to the moon? So I call up NASA. I'm a journalist. I say, hey, let me talk to this guy. I said, I doesn't give interviews anymore now after he put his foot in his mouth there. I said, oh, okay. They sent up a spacecraft unmanned, 3,500 miles, and it's kind of basically in the middle of the radiation. And they had 2 Geiger counters on board. They send the thing back. I say, hey, could I please have those Geiger counter readings? They said, I'm sorry, it's a classified secret. And I said, oh, okay, if you can explain this to me, NASA being an alleged civilian agency, all this is funded by the government, all the records are open. When you sent a probe to the sun to measure how much helium was in the atmosphere, that was publicly available information. When you sent a probe to Jupiter to see how much, hydrogen's in the air, that was publicly available. These are just, readings of nature. How strong is the radiation belt surrounding the Earth? Why would that possibly be classified? Because if they told you, it would prove the impossibility of being able to go through it. And so we have a lot of documentation from the 50s about this, how they set up Geiger counters and they broke because the needle broke. It was vibrating so much. The guy says the radiation cannot be penetrated until we develop the technology to do it. This is the only time in world history technology went backwards. They could do something 50 years ago they can't do today. It's impossible for technology to go backwards. So therefore, what does it mean? It means they faked the thing. I'm sorry. I could prove it with one picture. Two shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from two objects that are like 5 feet apart from one another when sunlight always casts parallel shadows.
Well, you said technology doesn't go backwards. This is completely ridiculous.
Whenever they do, one of these stories, not about the real possibility that the moon landings are fake, but isn't it interesting? A certain small group thinks that. They quote a survey from more than 2 decades ago because the current survey is up to 25% of Americans doubt it. 75% doubt that Oswald killed Kennedy. 50% doubt the story of 9/11. The current event, which I think is being falsified, but there's 2 claims. One is it originated here, and the other is, okay, I'm going to let you know a little secret. It originated here, so be very careful. That's made up too, because 25% of the population already doubts the authenticity of the moon landings, and it's even greater worldwide. So you got to have one lie for whatever they're doing now for the general public and one lie for those conspiracy truth seekers. But that's a ruse too, I think, in today's current situation.
There's a question in the chat room. Why do you think this was done? What do you think was the rationale behind faking the moon landings?
Well, the people who told me it was fake long before I believed it said money, 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 money. I mean, each moon rover in today's dollars is $100 million. The thing costs $200 billion. Even if you're making 6% profit, it's $12 billion a profit. And then I'm sure they're making more than that. It was pride. We'd have to admit that we bit off more than we could chew. Funny thing opens with the religious symbolism of the Tower of Babel, which was, for a long time until a couple hundred years ago, the greatest expression of technology was building the tallest building. And I open up with that. Of course, the Tower of Babel was never finished. I showed the Titanic in publicity that says the ship that God himself could not sink. And of course, it never made one voyage. And then Nixon, when he knew they were not on the moon, said it was the greatest event since creation.
But one more question before that. What is the point of Space Force?
I don't know. Is that a new television program? I mean, I guess they're just trying to make the government look mighty. We have Space Force and Disease Force and Tax Force and whatever. I mean, come on. NASA can't even send an unmanned probe around the moon. Exactly. With 5 decades better technology, they can't do it. They abandoned the project. Not that it was delayed, they abandoned it. They've said 10 times since 1969 we'll return to the moon in 5 years. 10 times.
Yeah.
China, the most industrialized nation on Earth, says it's going to take at least 15 years from today to put a man on the moon, which is twice the amount of time it took with 5 decades older technology.
Yeah, that was some marvelous technology, wasn't it? I want to make sure you cover, because that was, to me, the best part of the book when I talked about when you talked about what happened to you, because I think it's the first time you revealed it, what personally happened to you, people trailing you and abducting you and all that. But I don't know how much you want to share that, but maybe you can talk about it to the extent that you want to talk about it. But I think it's fascinating. This is real. I mean, it obviously was, if you had any doubts that was happened, they made it very clear to you that they were there and they were watching you.
Yeah, I mean, my life was a feature film there for a while. I never talked about it publicly because I'm already saying something hard to believe. We didn't go to the moon. I didn't want to go into these X-Files adventures. However, I started the book Moon Man. Remember, Sibrel, Sibrel.com. Free commercial. And basically, I go ahead and tell the story because I started writing it 15 years ago. And I figured I might as well tell everything, the backstory behind everything. Plus, we disclosed the actual base where it was filmed, the dates, and 15 people who were there, given by the chief of security who was there at the time, standing beside President Johnson while this thing happened. And the CEO of General Motors admitted in front of Congress that he hired former FBI agents to follow Ralph Nader. And the reason is because they didn't want to spend the extra $200 per car to put airbags in them. Mm-hmm. So if they're sicking FBI agents on a guy simply because he wants to put airbags in cars and make it law, think what they would do to somebody spearheading the investigation into whether we went to the moon or not, if in fact they really didn't go.
Yeah.
And so when I found this footage, I mean, it was 3.5 years into the project, and I figure we'll never know. We'll never know in my lifetime whether he went, and certainly no one will ever have any concrete proof, right? So I'm finishing up the film. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon, and I'm looking for the launch in real time, but everything NASA gives is already edited. I asked them for unedited footage. I only get pre-edited. There's not even the countdown in real time that's more than a half a minute long. I want to show the drama of the launch, have it 1 minute down, but I don't have it. So I call up NASA and I say, I'm working on this documentary about the moon landings, which is true. I didn't add to it. And I need the shot. They said, oh, yeah, we'll send you the tape. I get the wrong tape. Thinking, hey, okay, let me make sure you understand. And I unfortunately said, I'm trying to finish up the film here. I got the wrong tape a second time, the wrong tape a third time, the wrong tape a fourth time. And then when I call for the fifth time, they're like, now we'll pay your postage, but it'll take 8 weeks. When I used to pay my own Federal Express. I'm thinking they're on to us. You know what I mean? And so I start going through the tapes to look for the countdown, because I have all these tapes from NASA, but they're all like the same thing, except the second to the last one. And I figured if they didn't go to the moon, they're more likely to have made a mistake the first time they faked it, because they never faked it before. They're learning how to do it. So I asked for everything from just the first mission, all film, all video, all stills, and so forth. There's only like 20 pictures of an astronaut standing on the surface of the moon in the entire mission. Only like 20 pictures. Can you believe that? I mean, people go to the bathroom at Walmart, they take like 12 pictures. But in any case, here we are, and there's just 12 pictures, and then all the tapes are pre-edited, same thing over and over again. There's very little footage on the thing. So I pop in a tape, and it says, do not show to the public. And, and I'm like, oh, this should be good. I hit fast forward because I'm an editor. I can kind of tell what things are at 30 times normal speed. And I keep seeing the same shot. Imagine like a black screen with a little blue ball Earth in the middle of it, as if they're looking at the Earth from far away. The shot goes on for like an hour, and I'm like, oh, unedited footage, this should be good. I look at the label, and what's on the label and on the tape are two completely different things. Either it was a clerical error, or as Bill Casing believes, they sent it to me intentionally. I basically see this fake footage, and that's when I call up Bill in a panic, and I'm like, oh no, I have proof that we didn't go to the moon in my house. What am I going to do? What have I done? I have a blind roommate, a toddler son, and I'm like, oh no, I'm in deep trouble. So I remember calling up Bill, excited. Hey, Bill, you're not going to believe it. They really didn't go to the moon. They really didn't go. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. And I said, no, you don't understand. They really didn't go. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. And, it dawns on me that he was right. And I'm seeing them faking it right in front of my eyes. And then long strange things start happening. I start being followed, drugged without my permission. I was kidnapped. I escaped. I went to a lab. I mean, I peed in a cup, gave it to a friend, not under my name, to another lab to I want to prove I was drugged with something like truth serum or something. They had this clipboard with questions prearranged on it. Where's this? Where's that? Where's the tape? Where's the original? Blah, 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 blah. And I told them everything they wanted to know because, truth serum, whatever. I thought they were the good guys. And so there's no need to ever torture anybody. You can bribe them or you could drug them. So any torture at all is completely unnecessary. I guess that's retribution. In any case, so I take this urine sample to a lab through a friend, not in my name, turned out with these guys. And my friend calls the lab, and the lab says, well, we've had a problem. Well, what happened? And they say, well, we had a break-in over the weekend. And I said, yeah. And they said they didn't take anything except your urine sample. Like, oh, that's pretty good.
That's amazing.
So, and so, I was going to prove scientifically I'd been drugged by the government with, some exotic drug, true serum that's not available on the market. And I got them. I even gave it to a friend so there wouldn't be my name and all this stuff. And they still found out about it and grabbed it. Weird things like that, and 10 times more described in the book.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It does read like an episode of the X-Files. Bart went through just an incredible amount. I was shocked to see that. Yeah, you got to read it, the details in the book. I mean, I remember the first thing I remembered looking at the NASA photos, because theoretically, because they tell you the moon has virtually no atmosphere, so we should have had a look that was better than any planetarium on Earth, better than by far the crystal clear night in the Sahara Desert or whatever. We should have seen tons of stars and constellations of just a unbelievably sight that you would have seen, and yet you don't see any stars. And I love the way you were able to unearth the fact that during that very interesting press conference, which is really the only time the three astronauts, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins from Apollo 11, the only time they really talked, they look, you can still watch it online. They're very uncomfortable. They don't, like you said, they look like they're at a funeral. They don't look like they're celebrating the greatest achievement in the history of mankind and conquering heroes. But at one point, somebody asked Aldrin about the stars, because that's what I wanted. Why don't we see stars in the sky? It's just black sky. And he says something like, I really don't remember something. And Collins attempts to rescue him and says something like, yeah, I don't remember either, something. And as you point out, Collins was not on the moon. He was orbiting in the module, supposedly, around the moon. And in fact, you said that they've edited it now to say that the transcript has been edited to have Aldrin saying it instead of Collins's. And they just basically took Collins's words. Now, why would they do that if they weren't covering something up?
I see there's two teleprompters kind of recessed into the desk. They're being prompted. They're the only ones who knows what it's like to walk on the moon, right? So why does someone have to tell them what it's like?
Right, I mean, exactly. Yeah, I would think they'd have lots of flowery prose to describe it. I mean, they should have been writing sonnets. I mean, none of the romantic poets could have matched with those all. But and you mentioned earlier about the pictures on the moon. One thing I also think I found fascinating is there's only one picture, I believe, of the Earth from the moon. We've all seen the same kind of blue orb, but why wouldn't there have been a bunch of pictures of the Earth? Maybe different angles and maybe different looking every day, like more of a crescent or less crescent or something. And shouldn't the Earth have been a lot bigger? I mean, it looked kind of like the size of the moon, maybe a tiny bit bigger, but it should have been far bigger because it's much bigger than the moon. So, I mean, what were they trying to sell with that one photo? They had no interest in. When you think about when I photograph the Earth there, you think people back on Earth might be interested in that?
Well, they made a heck of a lot of photographic mistakes in the last mission, almost as if intentional or something, I'm not sure. The best understanding of astronomy is that actually the Earth would have been pretty much center over the horizon, half above, half below, always from the surface of the moon at any time. If you go to Paris, you're obviously going to take a picture of yourself in front of the Eiffel Tower. Mm-hmm. So there should have been all these pictures, and even live on TV, but they couldn't synchronize it accurately. They'd have to depict the Earth in real time that would match satellite pictures. And then with the clouds spinning and the exact portion of the Earth facing that part of the moon at that time. The same thing with the stars. They couldn't fake the constellations.
Yeah.
The tiniest error someone would, or omission would prove it was fake. So they tried not to talk about it. However, you look at space shuttle NASA pictures at sunrise or sunset, it's like still somewhat bright, and you already see stars in the sky.
Yeah.
So I think there probably should have been, but they knew they couldn't fake it, so they tried to just dodge the question.
Good point. Good point. They would have. And there's another question for you. What are your thoughts on the Mars rover images? And this kind of almost plays into also the movie Capricorn 1, which I notice is not played very often on television anymore, because it obviously was based on the doubts about the moon. And I think that movie portrays what would have happened. I mean, they went after those astronauts and they wanted to kill them. Much as they were kind of going after you. But what are your thoughts on the Mars rover? I mean, I'm dubious about all their unmanned craft as well. I've found the images from Mars to be very questionable.
Well, they already fake going to the moon, so they can't be trusted at all.
Exactly.
So some of the early probe pictures from the 70s look fake to me, and there's some landscapes that seem to match somewhere in Greenland somewhere. And I don't know, and who knows? I think what they do is they have secret missions, like let's say they're looking for Planet X or something like that, but they don't want to tell anybody. And they need to go to Jupiter in order to get a good view. So they create a mission in public. Hey, we're going to go to Jupiter and study its moon. And maybe it takes some pictures of the moon. But the main reason is some other hidden way. Probes, I don't know. I mean, who knows? They continue to lie. I don't think it really matters other than they're wasting money.
Yeah,
You
you're
know?
right. It's the same way as you look at the government. If they, why would you believe the CIA or the intelligence agencies about anything? I mean, with their record, same thing with NASA. NASA lied about its greatest alleged accomplishment, allegedly the greatest accomplishment in the history of mankind. Why would anybody believe any of this other stuff? And
People have to understand, pick a location wherever you are geographically right now. Pick a location that is 250 miles away, this city to that city. And then turn it vertical, and that's how high the space shuttle is.
yeah,
That's the height. That's the farthest height NASA can send astronauts today, even with 5 decades better technology.
Yeah.
So the moon is 1,000 times farther than that. And they're saying they went 1,000 times farther than they can go today, 50 years ago, with 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone on the first attempt.
Obviously the book is very important. It's kind of it describes your history in doing this, what happened to you. Amazing. If you guys have seen Astronauts Gone Wild, the end of it, Bart includes some footage where he left his mic accidentally on in Edgar Mitchell, I think, was the astronaut there, and his son, his young son, can be heard on there saying, "Should we call the CIA to have him whacked or something?" Which sounds like something out of Hollywood. But you say in the book that his son died at age 26.
And I wrote a song about this. There are 15 video links throughout the book. Like, at this point, stop and watch the funny things. You know what I'm talking about? At this point, stop, watch astronauts. Here's the NASA guy saying the radiation is deadly. Here's them saying they destroyed all the equipment, so forth and so on. And the last video is kind of a music video, a song that I wrote, and it kind of the summary of my life experiences with this whole moon landing fraud investigation. And the verse basically says he threatened to kill me, but look at him, he's dead at 26.
Astronaut son to the CIA to take my life far, far away. Instead, the curse fell on his head at 26.
You want to call the CIA?
He's stone cold dead.
Have him whacked.
From Proverbs, it says when someone issues a curse on someone that is not deserved, it will fall back on the person who issued it. And that's what happened to him. He threatened to kill me, and now he's dead.
If you watch Astronauts Gone Wild, it's fascinating to watch Armstrong's reaction, Collins' kind of psychotic reaction where he comes up to the camera and smushes his nose against it. It's really, and of course the one that everybody knows, like people, that's what they know you from. We have comments in the chat room. Oh, that's the guy Buzz Aldrin punched. But then you talk about in the book that you later had contact with Neil Armstrong, and you said you weren't at liberty to discuss exactly what he said, but you say that he basically said you were right, that he basically admitted in so many words that it was a hoax. What's behind that you can talk about?
I talk to these astronauts off the record, probably more than on the record, even though Astronauts Gone Wild is filled with on the record conversations. I can tell you that one or more astronauts made it clear to me off camera that I was correct, and basically good luck trying to prove it. What they mean basically is JFK, let's take a look at that, for example. The president is dead, no matter who did it. If Cuba did it, or the Russians did it, or the mob did it, or the CIA did it, he's still dead. Whoever did 9/11, 3,000 people are still dead. However, the moon landing is a positive conspiracy. It made everyone feel good during the Vietnam War protests. It gave them something to cheer about. Trying to take that away is like me telling you, Don, your favorite team that just won the Super Bowl, they cheated, I can prove it. You're ready to punch me in the face, right? They knew that's what I'm up against. And a third of the book is about the who, what, when, where, why, how the moon landings were faked. A third of it is my X-Files backstory, espionage adventures that I go into for the first time. And then the other third of the book is really an indictment of not only the federal government, but governments worldwide in general. These people did kill Kennedy. They did fake the beginning of the Vietnam War, which led to the death of 1 million people. They admit that the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which provoked it, they completely staged it. And we know they did 9/11. 3,000 architects and engineers say so, that it wasn't airplanes, it was something else, which means domestic terrorists. And these people are still at large, right? Whenever someone takes an oath police, Marine, whatever, to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It's the boogeyman's always in another country because the people who run the show are the boogeyman. They're Americans, right? Benedict Arnold was an American, and he was in the military. He was a general. So that's the real problem we got going on. And if the truth about the moon landing comes out, it would probably, to a certain degree, collapse America.
Yeah.
There'd be congressional hearings, and Iran would say, I told you they're the great deceiver. And people in factories, there'd be a new tradition. They got a quota to do, and they go, why don't we just pretend to do quota like the Americans?
Hasn't Vladimir Putin, I don't know if he said it himself, but I've read lots of things that intimations that he was going to, say something about it or try to expose it, that he's dubious about it. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I'm sure the guy knows the truth. He used to be KGB.
Right.
Right? And what kind of world do we live in when a president of the United States, who's CIA director, right, becomes president, the CIA of the Vatican, Jesuit, becomes Pope, and then you have the CIA KGB guy in Russia becoming president, It's a bad precedent happening here.
Yeah.
And I think other nations do know, Israel, Japan, China, Russia, they know. They're got some under the table deal. People think, oh, well, then they would tell the truth to ruin America. No, they wouldn't. They blackmail us. Much more valuable.
Right. And they were obviously paid off at the time. And I believe that there was a lot, the Cold War was basically phony anyhow. But that to me proves it, because the evidence was pretty clear there. And why didn't the Soviets, because the Soviet Union was still pretty strong during the mid to late 70s when Bill Kaysing and the others first started raising these questions. Why didn't they, jump on board and say, see, the Americans cheated, but they didn't, because I think they had a vested interest as well.
Well, if only one astronaut walked on the moon, just say Neil Armstrong went, nobody else, and nobody's been back since. And if it was fake, the truth probably would have been told by now. The problem is that one confession of one astronaut will ruin the lives of every other astronaut.
Right.
And a president is kind of faced with the same dilemma. If a president tells the truth about the Gulf of Tonkin, who killed Kennedy, the moon landing, 9/11, it'll drag America down. However, what's the alternative? That we get more and more and more corrupt? And the dollar would collapse probably, and we'd be made fun of, but it would be a good house cleaning.
And James Irwin is apparently the only one who might have had a guilty conscience or a change of heart, became a Christian, however you want to say it. But that could have been some powerful stuff. Imagine if he had come out, the media might not have let him. Again, watch Capricorn 1 if you haven't seen it. I think it's a pretty realistic, paints a pretty realistic picture of what might have happened if they did try to talk.
Well, I mentioned in the book, most people don't know about it, but there's a 10-second radio delay in all radio and TV now since 2012. They said everyone has to go HD in 2012, and built into the codec, hello DARPA, is a 10-second delay. Now, when Richard Pryor did Saturday Night Live, because the guy used the F word in stand-up, they were paranoid the guy might say it on live. The guy's professional, he would never do that. However, they put in a 5-second delay.
I remember, yeah.
Now there's double that, so that if one astronaut walks on TV somewhere, even live on national news, starts confessing, they can turn that thing off.
Yeah, they certainly can. Well, so Moon Man was it released last week or something? And when did it officially come out? And have you gotten much feedback from it so far?
So far, good reviews. Yeah, it's available on audiobook, Kindle, and hard copy at Sibrel, Sibrel, Sibrel.com, and you can get it. I'm surprised. I sold quite a few audiobooks of it.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. That's I'd love to listen to the audio version. It's a fantastic story, and you deserve a lot of credit for hanging in there, because I mean, how has it been as far as I ask whistleblowers, and you're basically a whistleblower and the greatest fake event ever. How has your family reacted to this over the years? Do they think you're a crazy wacko, or are any of them supportive and believe that as you do?
No, they think I'm a crazy wacko.
That happens. That's the way it is 99% of the time, Bart, I can tell you.
But it is what it is. I don't know why. I've always felt like, since I was a kid, standing up for what is right. Even though I'm a big sinner personally, something in me since I was like 5 years old to stand up for injustice, even against towering adults, holding my ground if I really believe something was ethically, morally wrong. Look at the two choices. Let's say they could go to the moon, they could plant a flag, hurrah. It has a certain level of historic significance. But if they couldn't do it, they lied about it, they embezzled billions of dollars, they murdered people to keep it a secret. That's more profound of an event historically than if they'd actually gone.
And I think it's incredibly naive to think the people that did this, and these are I don't know how many of them are alive that were participated in it still, but descendants that believe this, they try to ridicule you and kill the messenger. It's like TWA Flight 800, where the Navy almost certainly accidentally, they didn't mean to, they accidentally shot down an airline. They're never going to admit that. Oops.
Pierre Salinger, press secretary for President Kennedy, investigative journalist, went on national TV and said, I am 100% certain Flight 800 was taken down by a Navy missile. I stake my entire reputation on it. And you know what he said the next day? I retract it. I was wrong.
Well, they ruined his career anyhow. They called him names, and he no longer had that cushy ABC assignment he was the ABC's Paris correspondent. So I think he was probably the least busy correspondent. Whatever they were paying him was ridiculous. But yeah, that was definitely it. But I mean, they're not going to admit something like that, even when they didn't mean to do it. I don't think they intentionally meant to do it. They were just careless. But in this case, they meant to do this. They schemed. They fooled the public, and they used patriotism and.
I remember, Don, when I found out that Santa Claus was not real. I remember it's burned into my brain.
Me too.
I was crushed. Yeah, I cried and I cried and I cried. Yeah. This is the first reason why the government doesn't want to admit the truth. They told this grandiose, held ticker tape parades for them, and it's burned in people's emotions, the pride, the tears, the emotion. And to then tell them they made it all up, that's a tough one. And then you add to it the death of 3 astronauts who would have been the first people on the moon, but they wouldn't cooperate, murdered, according to his own dead relatives, murdered by the CIA. You see how hard it is? It's a hard one.
There's only a couple minutes left, and I want to make sure you have plenty of time to promote yourself and give all the links and everything. It just, the time went by way too quick. Bart Sibrel, just, fantastic work. And I urge everyone to go out and get his book, Moon Man. But give the links where everybody can find your work and buy the book.
Yeah, just go to my last name, Sibrel.com. S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel.com.
And that's so you can find the book there. And again, give the whole title of the book again.
Moon Man. It's been kind of my nickname for myself, and that other people give me. Oh, you're the Moon Man. So okay.
Yeah, well, it's a fitting combination because you had the astronauts gone wild, and you had a funny thing happen to the moon. And I think are both of those still on YouTube? They must have taken them down.
No, they're still there because that's old news for them.
Yeah.
Current situation, that's what they're censoring because it matters to them. They're both there. They're part of the video links. There's 15 interactive video links throughout the book. It says go to Sibrel.com, click on the video links at the top, and you'll get all the links. And that's 2 of them, those 2 films. And by the way, I also read the audiobook as well.
Again, I can't thank you enough, Bart Sibrel. And we'll have to have you back on. Good luck with the book, and keep up the great work. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.